So again, welcome to KR Center Zoom gathering for tonight. This is the first in a series of interfaith gatherings, and our goal is to seek understanding, to create cultures of encounter where people just spend time with each other. And the more we listen to each other and get a sense of the other, I think the world gets a lot better. And here comes Eric. I'm going to welcome him in. And that's good. Okay, well, so I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers as Eric is joining us. I'll start with Kari Wolf. Kari is the chair and associate professor with the Department of Psychiatry for SIU School of Medicine. She is a second-generation American Baha'i, and she's married to Greg, who's Lutheran. And they have 4 children and 7 grandchildren, and they are blessed to have their parents living with them with one of the grandchildren. She's one of our presenters tonight. If you want to give a wave, Kari, so people can know, yeah, that's right. Okay, here goes one more, letting her in. And Eric is with us now. Eric, if you want to give us a wave. Okay, he was there. Okay, well, I'll let him back in if he shows up. He appears to be coming in here, but Eric is our, he's also an associate professor of social work. He received his doctorate at Washington U, and he manifests his faith through service in the community in ways that benefit children, such as with the Compass programs. Eric is also the secretary for the Greater Springfield Interfaith Association. That's how we work together. And these two, Kari and Eric, will be presenting the Baha'i faith. And this is kind of a get to know you presentation. And at the end, we'll talk a little bit about how anything you want to ask. So Kari, I think I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to share my screen because Eric's internet is less than optimal in his travels. So let me see if I can do this. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Are you seeing the single PowerPoint, not all my silly notes?
The single PowerPoint.
Okay, great. So Eric and I have the privilege of presenting tonight on the Baha'i faith. And before we get started, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, but we are members of the Baha'i community here in Springfield. We are not in any official capacity, so what we're presenting tonight is our perspectives on the Baha'i faith, and it's not an officially sanctioned information, even though it's based upon the writings of the faith. Bedi Mesbah also supplied some of the materials for this presentation tonight, but he is also traveling and was unable to connect. Eric was able to connect, but Bedi could not. So just a little bit about what Baha'is believe. We believe in progressive revelation. So what that means is, in the beginning, God made a promise or a covenant between God and mankind. Baha'is believe this. And the Baha'is believe that God's end of the promise was that he would never abandon us. He would send down messengers from time to time, revealing more of his overall plan. But just like you can't teach algebra to a kindergartner, God couldn't reveal his overall plan in the beginning of time because humanity, civilization, was just not mature enough to understand it. And so that we believe that God has sent all these messengers through time, like Zoroaster, Krishna, Buddha, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, and we believe the 2 most recent messengers or manifestations of God are the Bab and Baha'u'llah. So that was God's end of the promise. Our end of the promise is that we're supposed to recognize and accept the new manifestation. And we know from history that that's always taken time. When Jesus appeared, all of society didn't immediately recognize him, and some people still haven't recognized Jesus. And so we know that that takes some time. In the Baha'i writings, we believe, and if you look back at the source writings for other faith traditions, each prophet or each manifestation of God praised the messengers who came before them, the manifestations who came before them, and each foretold of their return. And so that's an important concept in the Baha'i beliefs. And for us, we believe each manifestation brings 2 sets of laws spiritual laws, which are part of God's overall, God has one overall spiritual plan for civilization, for humanity, but needs to reveal it in pieces as we mature and are able to digest that. But the spiritual truths of all religions, we believe, are one and the same. But each manifestation also reveals social laws that are specific to society at the time. And so that's why there can be wide-ranging differences between some of the religions, not in their spiritual truths, but in some of their social laws. Eric, if you're talking, you're muted. You're on, Eric.
So it's, can you hear me?
Yes. We're on the slide about the Bob.
Thank you. The Bob is the forerunner. He has a role very much like John the Baptist in the Christian religion. So,
Hey, Eric, you're coming in and out, so I'm not sure if this is working.
all the prophets are getting a new cycle. So the Bob kind.
Yeah, Bob, Eric, your audio is not coming through.
So Eric, if you turn off your video, that may help your audio.
All right. And he was known from his childhood, honest, very scrupulous, very devoted. When he was a very young man, he declared that he was a manifestation of God and said that it was possible to be a prophet of God because the Islamic tradition that Muhammad was the seal of the prophets meant that he was the end of a cycle of prophecy that ended with him, and now it was time for a new cycle of manifestations of God. He declared his mission, and it spread very quickly. The Persian people were ready for a kind of reformation or a revolution in religious thinking. The clerics there in Iran had become very unpopular, and so the Bab's religion spread through many villages, and many clerics joined. Plus, he was imprisoned and then executed, and his followers went, many of them, into hiding, and many of them were executed or also persecuted. Let's go to the next slide and talk about Baha'u'llah. Baha'u'llah came from a noble family. His father had been a vizier, and as was typical for families of that type, he was married at a very young age to a distant cousin, and was expected to take a role like his father in politics. But from a very young age, he had shown an inclination toward generosity and philanthropy and spiritual matters that hadn't been very interested in statecraft, looked down on it.
Kari?
Yes?
Yeah.
I'm
Eric,
not here.
When he heard about the Bab's revelation, immediately became a Babi and accepted the Bab as a manifestation of God. And like many of the other Babis, he was persecuted at Chal, and that is where he had an encounter with a vision of the Maiden of Heaven. And that's very much like what happened to a great, he described it like a pouring of energy over him. And yes?
Eric, are you still with us?
Yes, promised to come soon after him. But he didn't immediately announce this. For about 11 years, he sort of helped administer.
Eric, you have a really poor connection. I'm sorry, we're just really missing what you're saying right now.
The Baha'is, and it was only in 18.
Maybe Kari should take over a little bit if possible.
I can. I don't know how much you got of all that, and I know Eric's continuing to try to talk. But Baha'u'llah was born in 1817, and the slide before this was about the Bab, and the Bab was really a manifestation whose primary purpose was to prepare the world for the coming of Baha'u'llah and to announce his coming. And the Bab actually means the gate. And so Baha'u'llah became an early follower of the Bab. And shortly after the Bab's execution, he actually, in the Siyachal, or the Black Pit, where he was imprisoned, because many of the Babis were imprisoned, he felt the Maiden of Heaven come over him, and that's when he knew he was a manifestation of God. But he took some time to announce his station because he was really trying to get the Babis safe and further prepared for his message. And in 1863, as he was being banished from the Persian Empire to the Ottoman Empire, he announced his station in Baghdad. And that's where the followers who were traveling with him, he shared with them that he was a manifestation of God. As the recognition of his teachings grew, he was arrested, imprisoned, and banished from location to location throughout the Middle East, and eventually was taken to the prison city of Akka in what is now Israel. And he continued to write volumes about the Baha'i faith and our holy texts for us, about his spiritual laws and his social laws, and providing guidance for present day society. And he died of natural causes in 1892 in Akka. And in his writings, he also foretold of future manifestations. So he did not say that he was the last to come. Some of the Baha'i principles and teachings. First of all, we believe in the oneness of God. As I talked about in the progressive revelation, we believe there's only one God, and that all of the messengers of God, all the manifestations of God, are coming from that same God. And so we believe in the essential unity of all religions, because all religions carry that same spiritual truth. We also believe in the unity of mankind. And that means a couple of different things. First of all, that means the equality of men and women. And in the Baha'i writings, it describes the equality of men and women like the two wings of one bird. And if one wing is not as strong, if one wing is not as strong as the other, then the bird cannot fly. And so both men and women need to be equally strong in society. That doesn't mean we all have the exact same roles. It doesn't mean we're the same. We each bring our unique strengths and to everything that we do, but we need to be equally strong. Likewise, we need to eliminate all forms of prejudice. Prejudice based on race, prejudice based on ethnicity, culture, disabilities. We just fundamentally, Baha'is believe that we need to eliminate all forms of prejudice. And ultimately, this unity of mankind will bring about world peace. And we do believe that world peace is possible, and that is the work that we are working towards. some of the things that we need to do to achieve this unity of mankind are a universal compulsory education. So everybody in society needs to be educated, and that education needs to include spiritual principles. And this education is a requirement because society has evolved to the point that we have the means to be able to educate everybody if we put forth the effort. We also need a universal auxiliary language. That doesn't mean everyone speaks one language and only one language. We very firmly believe in the cultural heritage that we all bring, and so people should maintain their native tongue, their native traditions, their native, everything about who they are and their lineage and past. But we also need a way to communicate if we're going to have the true unity of mankind and world peace. And so we all need to adopt one universal language that we can communicate with. We believe in the harmony of science and religion. For many in society, they see this as an either or, but the Baha'i teachings are very clear that science and religion actually work hand in hand to advance humanity. We believe in the independent investigation of truth. And this gets back to what I said at the beginning, that Eric and I are members of the Baha'i community. We're not clergy. There are no clergy in the Baha'i faith. Because we believe that society has matured to a point that everyone can be educated. That means it's each of our responsibility to read the sacred writings and decide our own religion, our own truth. And we do have an administrative arm that administers the affairs of the Baha'i faith, but there is never anybody who gets up in our community and tells us what we need to believe. That's up to us and our relationship with our sacred writings. We're also required to be obedient to the government and not be involved in partisan politics. That can be particularly challenging right now in our highly divisive and political world. That doesn't mean we don't vote. We are expected to vote and be expected to be active in our communities, but we are not to get involved into the divisiveness of the partisan politics. And we also, the Baha'i teachings talk about the elimination of the extremes of wealth and poverty. That doesn't mean socialism. That doesn't mean everyone has the same wealth or the same means, but that the extremes are not necessary for a functioning society. So Badi put these slides together. Eric was going to present them, but I'll do my best. There was a request to talk about some of the houses of worship. And we do not have a church in every community where there are Baha'is. Many Baha'i communities don't have a house of worship, don't have a shrine, don't have a church, don't even have a Baha'i center. In Springfield, we're lucky to have a Baha'i center. So in many communities, Baha'is
Maybe
worship.
my video,
Are you there, Eric?
can you hear me?
I can right now.
Okay. Well, yes, the houses of worship are intended for devotion.
We're losing you again, Eric. All right, I'm going to keep going unless you can get a better signal. So the Baha'i houses of worship, there are 8 continental houses of worship, which means there are a house of worship for the
sermons or lectures or classes in the actual sanctuary of the houses of worship. The term for houses of worship. Good luck. Thank you.
Okay, I think he's been delayed, and so he just got the message I'm going to try to present for him. So there are 8 continental houses of worship, which means it's a house of worship for the entire continent. These are the spiritual buildings that have been built. They all have some unique characteristics. The ones here, this one, if you can see my arrow, is the house of worship in Wilmette, Illinois, just north of Chicago. This is in Uganda. This is in Australia, Germany. Wait, am I out of order here? That's Chile, that's India, help me out here. That's American Samoa, and that's Panama. And so these are the 8 continental houses of worship. The intent is that as the Baha'i communities continue to grow and mature, we will have more than just this house of worship. This will be a center that will help the social and spiritual growth of the communities. And so there will be places of education, places of healthcare, schools, retirement facilities, social services. These will really become hubs for nurturing the communities. There are also houses of worship that are being built in other communities that aren't continental, they're more regional or national houses of worship as well. I'm gonna just skip through some of these. This is the house of worship in Wilmette. It opened in 1853 and was actually the first of the continental houses of worship. And it's all of the houses of worship are very unique architecture and are award-winning for their architecture. And for this house of worship, this was the first time that this form of concrete was used in building. And so it's very unique from that standpoint. The other aspect about the houses of worship is they're all 9-sided, because 9 is a very special number in the Baha'i faith. And so all houses of worship have 9 entrances, representing that the Baha'i faith is the 9th of the religions thus far, and so that all religions and all peoples are welcome to enter this spiritual sanctuary. So some of the impact that the Baha'i teachings have on kind of current society. So as you know, American society is highly divided right now. We live in a divisive community. There's a big focus on material, how I can gather wealth, often at the expense of others, or how I can gather things. We know there are a lot of systemic injustices, especially with respect to racism, but other systemic injustices as well. And we know that partisan politics are kind of leading our American culture right now. But for Baha'is, Baha'u'llah taught us, let deeds, not words, be our adorning. And so the Baha'i community has been working to really improve society for a long time. We do a lot of talking, but we try to really talk by our actions. And Baha'is have been working at the community level to really address a number of things. We've been working on racism and addressing racism for the entire time that I've been a Baha'i, my entire life, and for the decades before I was even born. And you know, in Springfield, several of the Baha'is have led these conversations about race for years, predating the current recognition of the racism that's existing. And so we have been actively working to combat racism. We also have been leading for a number of years children's classes that again are focused on spiritual virtues, not teaching children to become Baha'is or about Baha'is. These children's classes are open to entire communities, and they're really focused on spiritual values of unity, of truthfulness, trustworthiness, justice, just basic principles that Baha'is believe will improve all of society if people are taught these spiritual principles from a very young age. We work on environmental issues, planting trees, establishing recycling centers, clean energy, etc. We work on social action, working on solving the homelessness problem, food security, just things that really will improve society. And then Baha'is also have a specific model of consultation that really has been effective in moving the Baha'i community forward and helping us reach consensus in a collaborative way. But this consultation has been recognized across the world, and some countries or cities have actually sought out guidance from the Baha'i World Center in Israel on how to consult in this powerful way that really can bring disparate thoughts and actions together into one unified force. So I don't know if Eric is on to be able to talk about the personal aspect of being a Baha'i.
I've tried dialing in rather than using the internet, so perhaps my audio is good now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wonderful. Well, I think for me, as a young person, a question was whether I wanted to be involved in organized religion at all. And I think many people today have that question. When you are organized religion, you have to deal with other people. And if you have your own personal spirituality, you can just, if you something you don't like, well, you walk away from it. And I have found that being a Baha'i and identifying with my community has been a wonderful thing for checking my ego and making me question myself. If I disagree with my co-religionists, I have to struggle with that. I can't just assume that I'm right and they're wrong. And that helps, I think, a mature human being have a sense of humility and a sense of patience. And I think it's a wonderful spiritual gift for anyone to join any kind of organized religion. Now, about the Baha'i faith specifically, I felt at home with this religion since I first heard about it when I was a child. I grew up in a liberal United Methodist congregation and a Hindu household. I had a two-family kind of situation because of a divorce. And the Hindus also are very open about other religions. And my uncle was a Baha'i. Now, another thing that has helped me is getting engaged in particular projects in my life. And because in America, Baha'is are taught that racism is the most challenging issue. So it has become a priority in my life to look at human prejudices and racisms and try to understand them as a scientist. And another thing, I'm a trained scientist, a social scientist, but part of that PhD involves a lot of materialistic understanding of the world, and most people in academia are not particularly religious, and some of them look down on it. So a thing that I've gained from the Baha'i faith is that but so kind of religions that just believe things because that's what people believe forever. And that questioning, that quest orientation, that tolerance for doubt, well, at the same time, underneath it all, you've got a firm belief system, to me, has really helped steer me in life and given me some purpose. And those are the main points of what I would say about the Baha'i faith. The other thing, of course, is moral rectitude. Whenever I have a question or an inclination, I can pray. And when I pray, I feel that it brings out my higher motives and makes me take an action that's better for everybody involved. And if I wasn't a member of a religion or a spiritual person, I didn't have that prayer, I would be like many people and fall into all kinds of bad behaviors. So I really am grateful for prayer.
Thanks, Eric. For me, as Dan mentioned, I grew up a Baha'i. That's all I really knew. My mom became a Baha'i when I was very young. And that's really kind of geared how I approach my whole life. I mean, my whole life has really been focused on service. That's the main reason I became a physician. There were lots of other jobs that I thought would be really fun, and I, for a moment, contemplated doing, and then I realized that no, I would be more service to humanity at large if I were a physician. And so it drove me to be a physician. I've also, I remember as a kid that back before you had to do community service to get into college, I was always doing community service projects with the Baha'is, and all the other kids thought I was weird and why was I doing this, but that was just ingrained in who I was. And I've carried that forward as an adult. Now my service is a little different as an adult, but I'm always focused on that service. It also has really affected how I approach problems or challenges that I've faced in life. Baha'is are taught that we grow spiritually by going through tests. And so when something devastating happens to me, I'm able to quickly reframe that and look for the spiritual growth. That doesn't mean tests are easy for me, but those challenges that life hands me, I'm always looking for how I can grow and develop from that. And then I think it's also really empowered me. I've been taught my whole life that men and women are equal and that we need equality of all the races. And so I think that has allowed me, frankly, to achieve really good success in a male-dominated world of academic medicine. And I don't know that I would have done that had I not been, that concept of the equality of men and women been ingrained in my life at such a young age. But I've also had the blessing of growing up in Baha'i communities, which are very diverse. And so my entire life, I've been comfortable around people from all backgrounds, all ethnicities, people who didn't speak English very well, people who were different. That's been part of my Baha'i community, and that's served me really well as I have moved throughout throughout the country and met different people, and just in my work on addressing systemic racism, that's obviously been very helpful as well. And the Baha'i faith has just kind of given me a grounding. When I've been faced with major decisions in my life, I've been able to use prayer and meditation on the writings to really help guide me to make decisions that I think really have been better for me than the decisions I probably wouldn't have made without, or the decisions I would have made had I not used that prayer and meditation. So those are some of the ways that it has really benefited me. And I will stop sharing my screen and turn it back over to you, Dan.
Right. Well, thank you so much. I know it's incredibly crazy to try to explain a religion in such a short time, but we're all just about introductions. It's a sense of getting to know the other. I know there are several Baha'i members from the community. Again, I want to especially welcome you and thank you for always being part of our Kiara events, because whenever we're focusing on unity, you all seem to show up, and I think that's wonderful. I want to allow others who would want to ask questions. So if you can, just give a good wave and go ahead. And then Carrie, I'm going to let you answer questions, okay? So if somebody wants to wave and ask a question, Carrie can answer, and I'll just kind of watch here. And don't forget to unmute if you want to ask.
Yeah, this is Greg. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm curious about the Baha'i belief about heaven or hell or the afterlife.
Okay, I'll take that, but I know we have a lot of other Baha'is on camera too, and so if they can chime in if I've left something important out. So Baha'is believe that the purpose of this life is really to prepare ourselves for the next life. And so the analogy that we are taught is that just like a baby who is in the womb is growing arms and legs and eyes and ears and things that they don't use in the womb. Those are not the things that they need to survive and be successful when they're in the womb. They're growing all these attributes, physical attributes that they need to survive outside the womb when they enter into the next life. And so now we as human beings have all these physical characteristics, and our job in this life is to grow all our spiritual qualities. Those spiritual virtues I talked about, to improve ourselves, improve our soul, so that when we die and enter into the next realm, which is a spiritual realm, we'll have the tools and faculties we need to be successful there. And so we do believe in an afterlife. We don't believe in a heaven and hell. We talk about the spiritual qualities that we develop here will help us be successful and closer to God in the afterlife, but that there's not a punishment in the afterlife. The punishment is really having a lack of spiritual qualities to really be able to succeed and be near to God in the afterlife. The other thing we believe about it is that when someone dies and their soul goes to heaven, or the Abha kingdom as we call it, people who are here on earth can pray for our soul and pray for the progression of our soul and the spiritual development of our soul so that we can continue that spiritual path closer to God. I don't know if anybody wants to add anything to that. I have a lot more learned people in the audience here than me. Bob wants to add something.
One thing that I learned that's different from the Baha'i faith that I learned as a Christian was that, like Kari said, it's not a pass or fail. It isn't a heaven or a hell. It's like a spectrum, and so it isn't like if you get a 49, you fail. If you get a 51, you pass. It's not like that. It's like the better you are, like she said, the more attributes you have to carry on. And the other thing is that it's different than what I learned or thought, whatever, when I was a kid. God isn't keeping a list because he would be really busy. You know, doesn't have a list for everybody. You grow your own soul like when you work out, you're working your muscle. There's no God at the gym that's keeping track of how many push-ups you do. You do it yourself. So it isn't. You build your own attributes to carry on to the next world. And to me, that both of those things that make sense, because I can never picture, like Santa Claus's list or God's list. I couldn't figure that out. It didn't make sense, but now it does.
I'd like to go ahead and ask a question about the Maiden of Heaven. Can you talk more about her or it?
Eric, did you want to take that? I saw you light up.
Okay, I'm unmuted. I could answer that. The Maid of Heaven represents essentially the information and the knowledge and the gift of the new revelation of God coming through a manifestation of God to humanity. So, in one sense, the analogy in Christianity would be the church. So the Maiden of Heaven is sort of a personification of the church, but it's also a little bit like the Spirit of God, the Holy Spirit. So I would imagine, as a Baha'i, that what the Christians are talking about when they discuss the Holy Spirit descending upon Jesus would be very much like the Maid of Heaven. But in the Baha'i mystical conception, it's not just a form of God. It's more like the emanations from the unknowable, ineffable God coming through this manifestation so that humans can have access to it. I mean, we all can have access to God in various ways, but the only certain way that checks where we can refer to it as authoritative is a manifestation of God. So it's a very special kind of a presence. And it's a female presence. Spirituality is personified as a female in Baha'i mysticism.
Thank you. What's the relationship between the Baha'is and Islam, especially in the Middle East, where the Baha'is originated?
So the Baha'is, the Baha'i faith came out of Islam, if you will. So the Bab and Baha'u'llah were Muslims who then became announced that they were manifestations of God. And so much like Jesus was crucified and exiled and all of that by the Jews, because the Jews didn't recognize him as the manifestation of God. And the same thing that the Jews did with his followers, just like Christians did with the followers of Islam right after Muhammad's death, that same dynamic is playing out with the Baha'is in the predominantly Muslim countries in the Middle East, because we're seen as a threat to the status quo of Muslim, especially the governments that are run by Islamic clergy. And so the Baha'is are being systematically persecuted there because we are announcing that Muhammad has returned, and the Muslims aren't believing that Muhammad has returned. And so that's creating this conflict that's led to the persecution of the Baha'is. Many Baha'is have fled and have been able to flee, especially Iran, where they're being most systematically persecuted. But many are still there, and the Baha'is who are there are routinely put into prison for doing things like trying to go to school, or trying to have a business, or teaching children how to read and write. Those sorts of simple activities that we see as simple in this country, Baha'is are being persecuted and thrown in jail or killed for doing those activities, let alone trying to practice the Baha'i faith.
I would add, though, that also Muslims are oppressors. Although there are Islamic clerics in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, or especially Iran, getting Baha'is in trouble and really harming us, it is also Islamic scholars and religious leaders and lawyers and human rights activists that are defending us. Because Baha'is often don't, in those societies, it's hard for us to stand up for ourselves and take action because it's political. So really, the people who are saving us are very often Muslims as well. So our saviors and our persecutors are both Muslims, and that's because we're a minority religion in some of these countries where it's very difficult to be a minority religion.
Thank you both. And anybody else questions about the Baha'i faith or anything you want to ask our visitors? Okay, I think what I'll do then is I'll ask some, oh, go ahead, Mike.
I just wanted to alert everyone that one of our participants tonight is going to have a column on the Baha'i faith. I believe it's this Sunday's SJR, Nancy Flood Gollenbeck there. And it's her kind of her personal story. It's very, she ran it by a few of us before it was going to be published. But it answers some of the questions that came up tonight in terms of, what Baha'is view in terms of this world and the next world and our purpose on life and her story. I'd highly recommend it. So if you get the Sunday SJR, look for it.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. And Nancy, you want to give a wave so people know that we're talking? Okay, yes. Okay, thanks. Any of our other Baha'i guests who would like to share, maybe as Kari and Eric did, I know this sounds strange, but why does it matter that there are Baha'is in the world? What would you like to say about that? The essence of your being among us.
Nancy, you're muted if you're talking.
Okay. Bob and then Mike, is that okay? Bob first, because I saw you both go ahead.
Okay, I'll start. Okay, so we believe that God teaches humanity, like has already been said, through its manifestations, and that the manifestation spreads the word initially, the messenger, and then the people spread it from there. So that the purpose of all religions after the founder of the faith, the divine spirit, after he is spoken, and particularly after he's passed away, that the others have to carry it on, and they're spreading good ideas on how to build civilization and to improve society, so that if people didn't do that, it would just, nothing would change. So we believe that all religions, their goal, the members of their goals is to spread the ideas, and the ideas are spread whether you become that new religion or not. Everybody believes in the 10 Commandments, and people even that aren't Jewish can quote all 10 usually. So we're spreading the ideas and we're improving society.
Thank you. And Mike, did you want to add something? You want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, I guess your question was why is it good that there are Baha'is in the world? And I think the answer is really simple. We're a force for good. We're a force for unity. We're trying to bring about the unity of humankind. We are all, science has proven we're all 64th cousins or closer. And the central tenet of the faith is the oneness of mankind. And Baha'u'llah, if you go to the Baha'i Center, which is at the corner of 8th and Allen, there's a quote from Baha'u'llah on the sign there. It says, "The earth is but one country, and mankind its citizens." And so we have that outlook in what we do. Everything we do is about building unity. And if you look at the history, just in this city, in Springfield, we've been hosting race unity events for decade upon decade upon decade before people even knew that race unity was an issue, frankly. And that's not, to pat ourselves on the back, because, one of the things we talk about the history of the Baha'i faith, every time God creates he sends a manifestation, we believe, or a messenger, he sends it to the part of the world that's in the worst shape, where the people are, most sunk it down to a level where they need, they're not doing what God wants. And so at any rate, I don't know, I'm losing my train of thought a bit here, but yeah, we're a force for good. We try to promote unity. We're world citizens. We try to spread love and recognize that we're all part of one human family.
Thank you, Mike. And I just want to give a little witness there. Dolores, you want to give a wave up there where you are, or wherever you are on the screen? Dolores Martin and the other Baha'i members of the community, they sponsored the movie Racial Taboo, about a white guy that knew that he needed to do something about racism. And he says, well, I don't have any black friends. I guess I'd better get some. And so he does. And then from that comes some study groups. And one of my friends that's here tonight is Nate Randall, Pastor Nate. He and I, our churches got together in St. Jude's in Rochester and Faith Temple, and even some friends from the Methodists next door. And so that was one of my first big forays into racial understanding. So I want to thank all of you as Baha'i members for that work. It matters as we're dealing with what we're dealing with today. Any other thoughts, comments?
Yeah, this is Greg. I'm curious about when the next, what do Baha'is believe about the next revelation? When will we see it? Or is it predictable?
Well, we don't know exactly, and again, my Baha'i colleagues can chime in here. We don't know exactly when it's going to occur. We've been told it will be at least 1,000 years after the passing of Baha'u'llah, so we don't have to worry about being the one to recognize that manifestation. But we also believe that we haven't, I mean, the cycle of a manifestation of God in the Baha'i beliefs is that the manifestation comes, as Mike said, when society's in really bad shape. And the manifestation plants the seeds for springtime, and those seeds start to grow. And when that manifestation dies, the followers of that religion and society in general, because when the manifestation comes, society is reinvigorated. And society will grow and adopt these spiritual and social principles. Whether people become Baha'is or not, society will start to adopt a lot of these principles, just like we're addressing racism finally. And that's not the Baha'is pushing it, that's other societal forces that have led us to kind of wake up. But so we're still in the building phase, and we need to build this society that Baha'u'llah talked about. And once that is built, we will piece by piece as a society start to lose the direction that Baha'u'llah sent. And as we kind of go backwards, then we'll again hit bottom, and then another messenger will come. And so it's this cycle. You can look at each time a manifestation came, society really grew by leaps and bounds shortly after that prophet or that manifestation came. And so we believe in this cyclical nature. And for Baha'is, we believe it's going to be about 1,000 years of this cycle.
And one of the signs of the next prophet or manifestation will be their persecution, as all of them have been persecuted every time they've come. And yeah, that's one of the signs.
Okay, Eric, closing thoughts from you and Kari before I make some announcements?
Okay. Yeah, I think I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Well, one of the great teachers of the Baha'i faith, he was a cleric from Egypt, Abdul Fazl, and he said that the word Baha'i really has three meanings. Now, one of them is ideal Baha'i, the one who follows all the laws and does all the prayers and is saintly in all their behavior. And he said, none of us achieve that. We all want to be Baha'i, but we aren't really Baha'is. We're just trying to be so. And then, of course, there's another sense of the word Baha'i, someone who's enrolled in the religion and joined the organized religion, like those of us who are speaking today. And then there's another kind of meaning for the word Baha'i, which is anyone who's working for the goals of this revelation, the unity of humanity, world peace, an end to violence, and the project themes of wealth and poverty. And so anyone who's working for those things in the sense is essentially in the spirit of Baha'i, or is a Baha'i. So the word Baha'i has these different meanings. And what I think is good about learning about the Baha'i faith is you can incorporate some of the ideas into your own understanding of your own faith. It might give some illumination or a new way of seeing something in your own religion. Thank you.
Eric, that's awesome. Thank you so much. Kari, last thoughts before?
Yeah, just one thing I'd like to share. In the Baha'i teachings about unity, there's an analogy that I think is very beautiful and very meaningful, and I often think about. And I had part of the quote on one of the slides there, that ye are the flowers of one garden. And Baha'u'llah and the Baha'i writings talk about a garden is beautiful if it's a garden full of pink roses, and you have thousands of pink roses, and that's very beautiful to look at. But it's far more beautiful to look at a garden that has some pink roses and some yellow daffodils and some iris and some petunias and all sorts of different flowers and plants that are different shapes and different sizes and different colors. And that's what humanity is meant to be. We're meant to be this garden where every plant is unique and different, and every plant is nourished by the sun. One is not overshadowing and quelching the growth of one of the plants, but that we're all able to thrive and work in harmony together. And that's when the garden is really beautiful. And so that's at the end of the day what the Baha'is are trying to achieve, in my opinion.
Thank you so much. At a time of such division and separation, that's really beautiful language. We need that so much, that intention. Well, again, thank you to our speakers, Kari and Eric, and for our Baha'i community that joined us. Spending time together is a beautiful thing. Next week, if you're willing, we have an evening where we're going to use kind of the ancient PowerPoint tradition, if you will. Before there was such a thing as PowerPoint, it was called the Stations of the Cross. Those are the final scenes of Jesus reenacting his passion as he's going through that trial. And it's going to be through the lens of creation, the care for creation. We're in the month of season of creation within many churches. And we have several readers who are going to do some scriptures, some meditations on how we care, how the creation is suffering, and we need to kind of hold lament with it. So we grow a little bit in unity and maybe our resolve to do better. This interfaith series will continue in November. I think it's the third Thursday, I'm not sure, but our new rabbi, Arthur Stern, who's at Temple Israel, is going to join us. He's out in Los Angeles. He zooms his way into his congregation these days when he's not making a surprise appearance for a service in the park or something, but he's an awesome guy. You're going to love his story. He was in a homeless shelter once in his life, and now he's on the board of that homeless shelter. A few doctorate degrees later in rabbinical studies, he's quite a gift to our community. I think you'll see why. We're going to talk about Judaism with Arthur Stern. And then actually that's October. And in November, we're going to welcome Dr. Dharmendra Nimvat. He's a Hindu follower. And our Hindu community is growing. And we need to kind of find out like their facilities as well as their traditions and what's happening with them. So that's what's coming. Thank you so much. I'd like to close with a prayer, if you would, before we sign off. So if you'll join me. Oh, loving God, your oneness shines tonight in a way that's very beautiful. Thank you for the array of beautiful souls here and all throughout the world. Help us to recognize one another as beloved to you. May they be beloved to us as well, to each other. Bless us as we go from this place. Multiply our good works. Give us a charity of heart and mind. Amen. Thanks, everybody.
Amen. Thank you.
And you all have a good night.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kari.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay.
Thank you.